Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's a Thursday afternoon, and I am delighted to be joined by Chris McElwain, the double denim, and also JP Mason. Welcome back, gentlemen. And I'll tell you something, we don't have to exude a fake authority of positivity this afternoon, because I'll start with you, JP. That was brilliant last night, wasn't it? I saw your tweet last night. You wish you were at it. Absolutely. I've called it a colossal European performance, and I don't care if anybody criticises that and thinks I'm getting over excited about it. I just thought it was outstanding last night, JP.
Oh, it kind of had to be, didn't it? It had to be. There wasn't really another option. Well, the other option was taking a heavy defeat again, which I think everybody anticipated. I don't know if I thought we were going to get tonked like 5-6 or anything like that, but I certainly expected us to lose. And based on, I was messaging Paul from Celtic Fans TV yesterday because just wanted to say well done on his prediction video. He was talking about how the hyperbole around the Aberdeen performance was a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
I mean, they were good, but I got in a bit of a Twitter spat with the guy for ABZ podcast, because he, as you well know, when you go in Sky Sports, it opens you up to be attacked. And I wasn't attacking the guy. I just quoted him and said he said, well, we were unfortunate not to win the game. And I was like, whoa, that's English for stop a horse. That's not cool. Like, there's no way you could say. I mean, if you're going to say that, you need to then follow it up with, well, Celtic were also unfortunate to not to win.
Yeah.
And just go, oh, because we got a goal disallowed, so Celtic would have just rolled over for the next 35 minutes then, or 30 minutes, as that would happen. I mean, the way that we pressed for a winner at the end in the game on Saturday was admirable, and what I would expect and hope from a Celtic side at home in a game of that magnitude. So anyway, Paul and I were just discussing he was in Bergamo last night, and we were just discussing our respective European away record, and I think his is no wins, 2 draws and 10 defeats. And mine is 17, played 17, won 3, drawn 3, lost 11. I think I've got a few years on him, to be fair. So
how's the goal difference? How's the goal difference, mate?
I don't want to even look at that. Bear in mind, I was in Paris for the PSG game, so the aggregate's not great. But I was just so pleased for everybody last night. Despite not being there, I was just pleased for everybody that was there, because you know that people will not have just got direct flights there. You know that there'll be numerous methods of travel that get you there, people setting off 3-4 days beforehand, all of that. And the feeling, having been lucky to be in a ground where Celtic have won away or even drawn away, it just kind of, it's such an amazing feeling. And at that level last night in the Champions League, that's the first time we've kept a clean sheet since 2017.
Yeah.
In the Champions League. And that was one of the wins that I was fortunate to be at, was the Anderlecht away game.
Anderlecht, right enough, yeah.
So that's wild. And it now puts Brendan Rodgers in a lofty position of having the best away record in terms of wins and draws out of any Celtic manager in the Champions League.
Well, see, on that point, see that game against Anderlecht, is my mind playing tricks on me, or did Oliver and Cham have an excellent game that night?
Yeah, he did.
He did, yeah.
It was a notable one, yeah.
He was outstanding. He played a pass down the wing, I think, to Tierney.
Who's Griffiths, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's interesting that you bring up past records, because obviously, you know, the European record's been used to hit Brendan over the head with by the Scottish media mainly, Chris. And, you know, you look at the figures, and, you know, JP's just rhymed off a few Celtic supporters' figures in terms of European records. But Brendan Rodgers has been scalped about the head a few times with his European records. And the big chat when he came to the football club, or came back rather, was about progress in Europe. And James McKenzie tried to get some kind of definition as to what does that look like. And I think after the Dortmund game, it looked as though we were naive. It looked as though we froze on the night. There was a bit of stage fright by guys who were in brilliant form. They didn't carry it into the big game. And I think that the concern was there that maybe the Bratislava game was the anomaly rather than the Dortmund game. So there was so much riding on game number 3 to try and determine which of the first two was an anomaly. After last night, Chris, which of the first 2 games, in your view, was that anomaly?
I don't think. I mean, to be fair, I don't think there was.
That was a leading question, wasn't it?
What it was, you swing, you come back on, and this is what happens. By the way, can I just say, you saw what happened yesterday. Before I go to that, you saw what happened yesterday on the Wednesday bulletin when you left John and Patrick to it. The 2 doom merchants, they didn't have my optimism, and they went in both 3-1 defeats they predicted. And it was kind of leave those 2 alone.
It was a positive tagline. I was saying, can we shock Atalanta? I lined it all up for them.
I'm sorry. I'll get on it next Wednesday. I'll sort the 2 of them out. Honestly, you can't leave those two unchecked. But no, like I mean, I think, look, you know, we've said multiple times when the draw was made for the Champions League, not many of us would have looked at Dortmund and thought we're going to get much for that game. You know, what you're looking for is a battle and heroic performance, right? And that's based on what we've seen in previous records and a lot of the stuff that the GP's just mentioned as well. I actually heard on the radio before the match, I was catching up in some of the radio podcasts, and a relatively well-known pundit that I'll not name had said that, you know, Brendan Rodgers, you know, he's, for all his what he gets praised, he's an awful manager in Europe, and I thought that was a bit unfair. I thought that was an unfair tagline. I know that we look at stats and we look at metrics and we look at figures, and it can, you know, back that up. But Brendan Rodgers has come back in a second stint at Celtic, and he's building something, I think. And you don't build something and get results instantly, right? This was a new format in the Champions League, one which I think is working to our advantage. We've got a team now that is starting to gain a Brendan Rodgers identity, I think, in the way they play. I don't think they're the finished article, but I think they're getting there. We've had a great start domestically, and we were carrying good form into this first European game, but first one was a big unknown. We didn't know what we're going to see. Are we going to, you know, we're going to have a nightmare? And I always think you watch Celtic, you're waiting for a red card, you're waiting for an unlucky deflection, you're waiting for a dodgy penalty, you're waiting for something that just starts to you know, sum up the night. But the first game we go away, we absolutely blow Bratislava away. Brilliant performance, really, really great to see. And we go into the Dortmund game feeling pretty upbeat and thinking, you know what, this team's got some capability. And then reality hits. You know, we're going in against the previous year's finalists and a team with X amount of millions behind them, some really, really top players, and they were, on top of that, they were on it. And I think our guys, as you say, probably a combination of weren't quite expecting that level of competition coming in. Maybe they should have been. Maybe there was an element of naivety there. What we saw last night, I think, and I thought I'm sort of want to give Brendan Rodgers a bit of credit for doing a PR masterclass when he came out after the Dortmund game and said, "This is our identity. This is the way we play, and I'm not going to change that. I'm not going to change that." I mean, to be fair to him, is he going to come out and give all the opposition managers insight into how he's going to play? I thought I'm genuinely of the belief he played a blinder with that. And what he's done is he's went, after last night, all he had to go was say, gotcha. Did you really think we were going to go and play the same way? I thought last night was a mature performance. I thought it was a brilliant, it was a performance that looked as though we'd actually learned from the Dortmund game. You know, defensive discipline, brilliant, playing, you know, and fighting for every tackle, up against a really, really good side. And I want to make that clear. And look, okay, we didn't get the win. But what that showed me is that the level teams like Atalanta, who are an emergent European side, and teams of similar ilk, we're up there with them. We're not at the elite level. You know, let's be realistic. We're not at the elite level. We're not up there with the Dortmunds or the Real Madrids or the, you know, or the Bayern Munich yet. But where we are is those emergent European teams. We've got the potential and the capability to go and compete. And I thought last night we played with more savvy, more street smarts, and more fight and desire than I think you know, a lot of the teams that we're in this group with will be able to show. So yeah, brilliant night. Really, really pleased. I was trying to get back so I could join you on the post-match bulletin, but yeah, it was brilliant. So I don't think any of the games have been an anomaly so far. I think it's just slowly demonstrating where we are in the, you know, in the food chain, the European food chain at the moment.
Well, if we are able to, I look at the new tiering system, JP, in the league, and I think your elite clubs, your top end clubs are going to be in the top 8. Then there's that middle bracket, and I think that's what we need to aim for at the moment. I'm looking at the league actually, and I'm looking at our upcoming fixtures. So if you consider Leipzig being our next opponents at home, so they're sitting in 31st position, having not won a point, which I think is quite interesting. Bratislava, bottom of the table, we've already beaten them. Young Boys, second bottom, 0 points. We've yet to play them. And we've also got, I call it Club Bruges, JP. You're a much far-travelled man than I. But when I'm watching the movie, I call it In Bruges. But people call it Club Brugge. So am I going wrong? Is it Bruges or Brugge?
I mean, I had a similar conversation with my mate last night about the pronunciation of Alex Bailly. He was like, "It's Valle. You're no Spanish. You can't say Bailly." And I'm like, all right, okay, I'll just defer to ignorance then. So I don't know. I've heard that Bruges and Brugge, but I'm not going to say one's right and one's wrong when I don't know for sure. I do know for sure about Alex Bailly because I looked up the translation, the vocal translation or audio translation of how to say that name, and it says Bailly. So I'm going to go with that based on the internet.
Run with it, JP. Run with it.
What were you asking about Bruges because we're playing them next? I watched the second half of the AC Milan Bruges game and they rattled Milan even with 10 men. The boy came off the bench. I can't remember his name, but he's 19. Scored a really, really good goal. It was really well worked to equalise. And I think the commentator said he's looking around thinking, have I just come off the bench and scored an equaliser in San Siro? I'm 19 years old. What a feeling that must have been. Obviously, Milan, kind of flexed their muscles and took advantage of the extra man and ended up beating them. But I saw enough from, I didn't see the first half, but all the people, the pundits that in the second half were certainly talking up Bruges' performance in the first half and saying that they'd been pretty good. So definitely not something to be going into thinking, oh well, we're at home, we've played well so far, we've got a point away. The concentration levels, I said to my pals last night, I watched it in Rutherglen, in Chapman's bar in Rutherglen, and I'd never watched a game in Rutherglen before. And I didn't say to my mates when you never want to jinx it, but my dad worked in Rutherglen for like 20 years of my life, and 20 years of his life, obviously, as well. And I always remember going to my dad's work with him on days off, and so I kind of know that part of the town, but I didn't realise how close we were to DB Wilson where he worked. I mean, I got home last night and it was a minute's walk from Chapman's to my dad's work. And I just had this feeling. I went in, I was like, I don't think we're going to get beat tonight. I didn't think we were going to win, but I didn't think we were going to get beat. And I don't know if people can scoff and be like, oh, hocus pocus or whatever, but I just thought if my dad's got a hand in this, then we're not getting beat tonight. And it was with a good group of people as well. And sometimes that plays a part. Even though the TV was like miles away, and actually at times it felt like I was watching a different team. It didn't feel like I was watching Celtic played that well that from a distance I was like, this doesn't feel like I'm watching Celtic, like in a Champions League away game. It just felt like you're watching something else. So, but yeah, I just going back to the game itself. I actually started to get a bit of a headache thinking about how much those players were having to concentrate last night because you just could not. That team were really good. Obviously, I know they were missing a couple of players, but they had the firepower to do us damage if we switched off for a second. And you just know that you're going to need those concentration levels in every single other Champions League game. It's not all about a battling performance away from home. You need that discipline at home as well, because I mean, Bruges are now, I don't know where you said Bruges were in the table, but they're obviously going to be coming to Celtic Park looking to get 3 points. That's going to be their objective. They're the Belgian champions. Okay, Belgium isn't the most decorated league, but I certainly, if we are pulling Arne Engels from, sorry, that's not the right league, isn't he? He didn't come from Belgium.
He came from Bruges Youth Academy,
Yeah,
JP.
yeah.
You know, so
I mean, and you look at the national team as well. They're no mugs. So definitely wary of it, and but looking forward to it at the same time.
Well, by the way, I do believe in the kind of energy that you're talking about last night. Sometimes you just get that specific feeling. But the reason I was bringing that up is because a lot of the teams that we have yet to play are below us at this moment in time after 3 games. The club, interestingly enough, that has had a similar run of games as Dynamo Zagreb. They've played 3 like Celtic. They're on 4 points just like us, and they've got a poor goal difference at the moment because they were also leathered. And I think that when they were on the first game, I think it was Chris, a lot of people wrote them off. You were looking at that as an away tie that we can win. What this has shown us with this new format is that, you know, the games that you think might be givens or might be good to get a point or even a win from, it may not work out like that. Now, one point I'm going to make about Atalanta last night is I agree with you, JP. I think they're an excellent side. Before anybody tries to convince us otherwise, they're a European trophy holder as we speak, you know, and in previous seasons, they gave kind of warnings that they were going to be this club that could progress in Europe. And what I took from last night is the fact that going into these games against a team like Real Madrid 2 seasons ago, or Atletico Madrid last season, or Dortmund this season, the players that you're playing against often look otherworldly. They're faster. They just seem to be like machines, like robots. You think to yourself, we can't breach them. They've got this incredible mentality and physique and technique. Last night proved that you can frustrate them, Chris, because you looked at that sideline. That manager was frustrated. He's pulling off some of his most important players, subbing them off. And I think what I'm taking from it is that even if you're playing one of the top clubs, you can frustrate them, Chris. And then the human element takes over. They then start pinging balls into the box, hopefully, and just hoping that something's going to happen, rather than maintain their own discipline. I think we got to them last night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like I say, you go into the game and you're expecting to see certain things. When AJ, for example, gets a yellow card,
he is a machine, by the way. He is a machine, by the way, isn't he?
But at that point, I'm thinking red card's coming. You know, through no criticism of the player at all, but I'm just thinking, God, here we go in Europe. It's going to be the same old story. One bad tackle, he's going to be off, and it's just called when he collapsed. But do you know what? For whatever circumstance, or whatever reason, it didn't happen. And actually, AJ, like, I could name almost every player and pretty much all the subs. For 90 plus minutes, they just battled. And sometimes I think, you know, football is just about battling. It's just about do your fundamentals well, right? I mean, Celtic, we know they're a team that can turn it on. You know, we can play with flair. We can, you know, we've got Maeda bombing up the wing and Kuhn bombing up the wing. We've had some real showpiece games domestically, but Europe's a different animal. And what you need in Europe is, I think we saw last night, and actually on a converse point against Dortmund, is you need to be on it for the full duration of the game. And it's just about doing all the basics right. Don't give up the silly chances. Don't create a rod for your own back in the game. And there were points in the game early on when I thought, you know, Kuhn finds his way through and then, you know, doesn't get a chance to pull the trigger. Maeda puts in a brilliant cross, probably the best cross I've ever seen Maeda put in. You know, he whips one right low across the box. And unfortunately, Ida's not in the right position to go on it and no one's following in. But I'm thinking, God, is this going to be one of these performances where we're creating the chances, but again, we're just not getting the break of the ball, they're not going in. But what was important in the match and what was brilliant to watch was the last ditch tackles, the throwing bodies in front of the ball. You know, frankly, paying the opposition enough respect, but no saying, all right, we'll just stand back and let you do what we do. It was like, you know what? Even if we lose tonight, we're going to make you realise you've been in a game tonight. You know, you guys are going to trudge off there in 95 minutes and say, bloody hell, you know what? That was a tougher match than what we thought it was. And I thought it was a brilliant game. I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy watching the game. I'll be totally upfront. When I was watching the game, I was watching it on the phone, and I watched something on the TV, and I was stressed out. The game was just it was like a blur. So I can't even pinpoint a lot of individual bits because it was just I've never felt as wound up and as tense watching a game. And it wasn't until it was finished, it was just like, oh, right, relax. And I think we even said it on the group chat, you know, breathe. But I really want to give credit where it's due. I mean, I think the way Brendan set up the team and the way they've executed his instructions was tremendous. There's been players subject to some criticism. I've criticised Callum McGregor late on games for maybe getting exposed in Europe. We've had issues about the left back position. Scales has had it for the best part of 2 years. Trusty's been under a bit of scrutiny. Do you know what? They were outstanding last night, and they played as a proper unit. So respect where it's due, and the manager has to get the credit for that. So one of the worst European managers Celtic history. I don't care. On to the next game. Let's see what he can do. Judge him on what he's doing now. Forget about what's happened. Judge him on what he's doing now.
Yeah, use it as a means of galvanising the side and getting through it. Yeah. This, for me, as damaging as the Dortmund result was, this will have a galvanising effect on the players, and there'll be a belief that, you know what, our game plan can work. We can frustrate these big teams. JP, you described Twitter/X last night as a bin fire. I would go further than that. I think it's a bin fire, right, in an abandoned shopping trolley getting pushed down a steep hill. That's Twitter for me. And I had the audacity to praise the team last night, the absolute audacity of it. And what I said was that Schmeichel and Scales and Trusty came under a lot of criticism after the Dortmund game, and they did. I mean, I'm going to pull it up, and I'm not having a dig at the person in question. You can check the live chat from last night's halftime bulletin, where someone in the comments said that Liam Scales was a farmer. Now, this is the type of criticism I'm talking about. All week I've been hearing comments about Kasper Schmeichel being overweight, being a busted flush. I'm hearing that Trusty's off it. I heard it on BBC. I don't have to hear it on social media. I heard it on BBC that Trusty wasn't at the right level to come into the Celtic side. Last night, those three players, and others, JP, but those three players for me stood out. I mean, they were colossal. That's the tagline I'm running with today. But I thought Trusty, Scales and Schmeichel, that triangle there at the back, that trio, they were outstanding last night.
Yeah, I just thinking back to the first half of the Aberdeen game, and because we were playing right to left, I was actually focusing on Trusty quite a lot in that first half, and I could just tell by his body language that he's not comfortable playing in that position. Like it doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out. That if you're playing at the wrong side of defence on your wrong foot, then you're not really going to be as confident. But he's just getting on with it. We've paid a lot of money for him. He's getting paid a lot of money. It's just a case of, right, well, Carter Vickers is out right now. We need you to step up to the plate regardless. And he did get a hard time, particularly from my mate Chris, for turning his back on Graham Shinney's shot, because if he stands up to that shot, you maybe think he's more likely to see where the ball's going or be able to stick a foot out or whatever, but he turned his back in it. I haven't actually watched that back, so I hope I'm correct in saying that that is actually what happened. But I think he answered any critics last night to the point that, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was such a thing as trending on Celtic Twitter, the amount of tweets I saw saying Trusty the process and Trusty arrived tonight and all this sort of stuff, and you're just like, well, good, because players don't just immediately arrive and become the finished article, as we've seen with many, many players over the years. And I listened to the eTims podcast this morning, and they were kind of sort of sticking up for Engels as well, just saying, look, you can't just expect this guy to suddenly be an absolute world beater straight away. I mean, and I'm like, oh, we've paid 11 million quid and, you know, things like that. And one of the guys, Monty, actually said if people are starting to pile on Engels, then they can go and take a flying. You can imagine what the rest of the sentence was. So it's good that hopefully there's elements of the fan base that are kind of like going, oh, right, let's just give these guys some time to sort of bed in. And I was so relieved that we had Schmeichel in goals last night, and I wouldn't be surprised if Hart went down after his commentary duties and they shared a big kind of Predator style in the changing room or somewhere else, because I mean, it was great watching the clip of Hart talking at the end of the game, and obviously you're getting insights into players' character and the manager's instructions and everything else, because he played there under Rodgers now and Postecoglou, but he was buzzing last night, clearly, because he knows what getting a result like that in Europe means. Like, absolutely, to the fans, to the manager, to the players. And I really, really am pleased for Brendan Rodgers that, especially when he sat there in the press conference and went, people have been saving up vitriol to spit our away because they don't like seeing Celtic doing well. And because we've got the domestic success, it's like, you get pulled down a peg, you get your pants pulled down in Europe and everything else. And obviously the guns were silent from the other side of the city last night, which was also enjoyable because they love to have their wee say, even though they're in a complete mess themselves. But, I'm sure they all had a great time at the fact that we got tonked off Dortmund, only for 3 days later the same thing to happen to them from a far lesser team at home. So yeah, it was just, like you say, Scales as well. I don't really know what the guy needs to do. That there's surely now only a smaller percentage of people that are still on that.
There must be
that pain of wanting to just. Like you say, call him a farmer. It's just horrendous. It's just so disrespectful, and you think people would be proud of the fact that there's an Irishman playing for Celtic in the Champions League and helping us get massive results like last night. Because I am.
So absolutely, and when you look at the makeup of the team, you look at the fact that yes, we do have big signings in there. You've mentioned a few of them, but we've also got guys that were plucked out of Japanese football for under £1 million playing in that team. Maeda, I think, was about 1.2, and Tatati was 800 grand or something like that.
Best ever January signing we'll ever make, by the way. I said it with a fair amount of hope and optimism, but 2 years down the line, or however long it is, 2.5 years down the line, you're going,
superb.
How the hell did we get that guy? Like, honestly, it's wild, and I'm so glad that he seems to be happy and isn't agitating for a move or anything like that. He's just a really, really top professional guy who has got a couple of kids and his wife here and must enjoy their life in Glasgow, because I just don't imagine how he would have signed a new deal if he didn't. And he's obviously just happy to commit himself to Celtic, and God, long may that continue.
What a January that was. The 3 Japanese imports plus a wee Matt O'Reilly chaser at the end as well. It wasn't a bad January. Ladies and gentlemen who are tuning in, and there's quite a lot of you, 1,600 on this Thursday afternoon. I'm nipping away to Glasgow because we have a very important guest to interview for This Is Acsom in the shape of Mick Lynch. There you go. There's a big belter of an interview for you. He's going to be joining us. I'll be in Glasgow speaking to him today. And Chris is going to hopefully not block too many of you, but he will be looking after you. Matt Riley comes in. This is a pertinent question. How's your music knowledge, Chris? Because
it's limited to
that. Guns N' Roses. There we go.
Limited to that. Limited to that.
Appetite for destruction.
That's it. Yeah. It's funny. That should really be the theme tune for A Wee Team Across the Water, right?
Well, the thing with that as well, talking about the kind of reaction and the response, I would go back to the very first match day in this Champions League. JP was making the point there before I go about people willing Celtic not to do well. You're talking Scottish media, you're talking team fans of other teams, etc., willing us not to do well. Can you remember after the Bratislava game where we absolutely trounced them, and it was a meaningful Champions League victory? Brendan Rodgers went into the press pack afterwards. He sat down and he was trying to have a bit of a joke, and he's obviously feeling quite high and all the rest of it. Between me and us and Bayern Munich, and not one person got in on the act.
It was a bit of a tumbleweed moment. Yeah,
it was a complete tumbleweed moment, and I'm just thinking to myself that even if it was the manager of Rangers going in there, there would have been forced laughter. But they're just thinking, what, you've won, but we're not going to give you too much credit, Brendan. Regardless of how witty the response was, I just felt at that moment in time, we're up against it, Brendan. You know it. We know it. You've given them a wee bit ammunition with the Borussia Dortmund performance, and I think we've pulled it back for the Atalanta. I'm going to head off now. 1,600 on the live stream. Chris and JP are more than capable of running the show for the next half hour. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you again tomorrow at 12:30.
Cheers.
All right, guys. So yeah, I will do my best not to block anybody. In fact, it's probably better if I just don't touch the screen. But I will try and bring up some of the comments that Paul Johns kindly starred for me. So, yeah, I mean, obviously we'll continue a wee bit on the Atalanta game, JP. But we've also got the Motherwell game on Sunday to look at. And one of the things that I am a wee bit concerned about is we did see that old cliche of a bit of a European hangover after the last European game against Dortmund going out domestically, and I think we toiled more than we had done up to that point in the league. But I think on the flip side of that, what we are seeing with a Celtic team at the moment is a stronger squad and better squad depth than what we've had previously. I mean, you saw it last night with some of the subs that came on. They had to continue that high intensity, work rate that the team had. I mean, oh God, it was just unreal. I mean, I was knackered. I was knackered watching it. The same as you. You had a headache. I was done in.
Well, I was like, you said that it was to me it felt like being on a flight. Like, I don't like flying, and the whole time I'm on a plane, I'm just looking at the clock, being like, when is this going to land? And that's what it was like last night. Just being like, when is the full-time whistle going to go? Especially in the second half, because you just as you said, you're just waiting on something absolutely horrendous happening, like a second yellow for Alistair Johnston. Remember, it was the same referee from Rotterdam.
That's right.
So, I mean, he obviously is not shy with his cards. So you're constantly thinking, well, the Celtic tradition in Europe is to lose a goal, or fair enough. We've conceded some amazing goals against us, like your man in Dortmund, who absolutely leathered that left foot shot past Schmeichel. Some people still think he should have saved, which is wild. But the other things, like balls just deflecting into players' paths, like the first goal when the boy went to like pass it to the side and it took a nick off her, and then goes into that danger zone between a striker and the keeper. Keeper's obviously going to have to come out. You're just waiting on moments like that.
Yeah.
And fortunately for us, they didn't arrive, and we had that, like you say, that maturity and kind of discipline to just concentrate on every single aspect of their attacks and what they were doing, because you take your eye off one of them for a second and it's game over,
Yeah, you just don't get the time. I mean, you just kind of afford to make the mistakes. And I'm hoping, I think I said something that I don't remember going down particularly well in the comments, but I said after the Dortmund game, and it's right, it's post-match bulletin, which is never the easiest one to do when you've been on the end of a hiding.
Not done one for about 3 years.
It's
many of them in lockdown, and they were weird situations. From there to sitting here to talking about a game that I've just watched on the telly in an empty stadium, it wasn't pleasant, especially when a lot of the results weren't great either. So.
No, but I remember I thought, you're trying to do something that and break down your analysis of the game. And I remember I said it, and I have no idea how I said it. I probably said it wrong. Everything that sounds great in your head, and then when you say it and you listen to it back, you're thinking, oh God, what was I thinking? But I remember saying the only positive we can take from the Dortmund game is we have to learn. We have to take some lessons from it and carry it into the rest of the campaign. And I think, we alluded to it today, not being quite so naive, cutting out some of the individual errors, no trying to play cavalier at a level that we don't play week on week. And obviously a lot of people say you can't take any the positives out of that. I know a fair comment, right? It was a really hard one to take. But I think now looking back and reflecting on that, when you see the way we set up last night, there were still, some of our passing wasn't great. There were still some particularly when we were trying to transition to play, there was still wee elements where we weren't, hitting our marks. But what we did do, I think, is we took elements of that Dortmund game where we had to tighten up. I mean, positional awareness, high pressing, sticking to the job, doing the simple things well. And I think that's, again, this whole campaign for me, if we qualify on the back of the performances, even if we get maybe another defeat, as long as it's not a heavy one like Dortmund, even if we get another defeat or so, maybe against Villa or whatever, but if we can take that kind of performance and that kind of game management and intelligence into the rest of the campaign and get to the point where we hopefully qualify, I'm not looking beyond that. I would view that as progression. And for me, that's a short-term objective for us at the moment over the next couple of years is, and first of all, dominate domestically, get into this new European format, and look to be consistent qualifiers. Even if we're not winning the groups, just get into the playoff and get to the point where we're qualifying. That for me would represent short-term progress. It remains to be seen whether or not the board has got the ambition to go and try and build on that and take us even further. And we're obviously hamstrung with the domestic league and the finances, etc. But I mean, it was just for me. It was just the difference between the Dortmund game, where we did look naive and we did look like we were a wee bit shell shocked, to just that level of, okay, we know what we're coming up against now. Let's go and do the job. I thought was brilliant. And as I say, I think the manager's got to take some credit for that, as do the players.
I mean, absolutely. But I think going back to what you said about the board and whatnot, I mean, we've actually got a guy in a chair at a desk now in charge of that aspect.
Yeah.
Who, like, there's no way he's going to have been like, all right, well, I've helped you out with these transfers to get Nicholas Kuhn for 3.5 million and Adam Ida for 9.5 million. It's not as if we're suddenly going to become austere and not actually continue to spend. I think that's probably the warning sign for rivals is that we do have money to spend, and now we can hopefully spend it wisely and not have these signings that come in that don't work out and then leave or go on loan having contributed nothing. So but just on the league games going into European games, I was listening to the 20-minute Tims guys, and they were talking about how, if you look back to the game before Dortmund, we tonked St Johnstone 6-0 away.
Oh yeah.
And that maybe gave us a false sense of security in terms of our own prowess when we were going in to play Dortmund. But then the fact that we got a really tough game against Aberdeen, who tested us, perhaps that was a better game to as a prefix to the European Cup last night, that we actually were set up better as a result of that game. And people might disagree with that. I don't know if it is necessarily 100% true. You can't know that because you're not inside the players' heads. But it certainly it's a bit remarkable that that's the case. That we've had a draw at home on Saturday against a team that's got the same amount of points as us in the league, and we were throwing everything at it towards the end of the game. And then you're going into that game last night maybe with a bit of caution, and obviously that's down to the manager and how he set it up as well. But yeah, Brendan Rodgers came back here primarily to, I think, win back the fans that had doubted, that had obviously poured so much scorn on him, and perhaps rightly so, because it was a really horrible moment when he left, because you genuinely thought you were in the football equivalent of the Titanic. And fortunately for us, we had a guy in Neil Wennon who came in, and despite what anybody says, he got us over the line with that league title. And I don't subscribe to the it was set up, it was easy for him or whatever, and he had that point. If Neil Wennon's that bad a manager, then he could have easily blown that league title and the Scottish Cup final, but he didn't. And I'll forever say, and apparently Ali McCoist is now saying it as well, that he looks back on that COVID season and does question the mentality of the players that are there, and whether or not, had fans been in the ground, it would have been the same story. I said it at the time, I got ridiculed for it, but I mean, one of their legends, quote unquote, has now said the exact same thing. So, but no, and also there was something else about when we came back from the international break. There was something that Brendan Rodgers said, and it's something I never ever really thought about before. It's completely obvious, but if you're bringing players back that have been on international duty, and he said you have to recalibrate them almost, because they've been trained to play in so many different ways when they go to the international setups. So when you come back, it's almost like trying to shake an Etch-a-Sketch and then start drawing again. And that's exactly what he needs to do as a manager. And good managers can do that and cope with that, because there's, like I said, there's a lot of international players in that Celtic side who go away, and obviously there's a travelling aspect of it as well, which is an obvious thing to take into consideration. And it was a shame that our two Japanese players that went on international duty shared 20 odd minutes between them almost kind of like, what was the point, you know?
Yeah,
But,
you leave them with us, you know, keep them there, keep them fit, and keep them safe. You know, it's just
you've got no real need or plans for them to play in those games, and why have them travelling all that way for very little? And I know that it's international games, you don't know what's going to happen. Someone could pick up an injury in the first minute, and then you need to bring them on. I get that. It's just a bit frustrating because Maeda did not look at it at all on Saturday.
No, one of his least effective performances for quite some time, I think. Yeah,
and I think Trusty had like only trained on the Friday, I think, and just come back. So yeah, and also, if you remember as well, going into last night without Carter Vickers, I was just like, oh no.
Confidence was not there.
You just know that we're a better side with Carter Vickers playing in it, and to go into like our biggest test, second biggest test after Dortmund without him is just so frustrating that he's missing out on these big games because they're experiences that you don't get a lot of opportunity to have. And he's committed himself to Celtic, seems really happy at Celtic, obviously. And it's quite annoying that a player of his caliber isn't getting to play at the biggest stage and is missing out on nights like last night.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we know what his quality is, and I would really like to see him coming back. But I think he is a player that we need to manage. I think maybe previously we've not necessarily had that quality in squad depth to leave Carter Vickers out or to try and rush him back, so that we shore up that defence. I think what we're seeing now with Scales and hopefully now going forward with Trusty. And just touch on Trusty before I carry on with that point. Are we falling into the same trap that we fell in with Nicholas Kuhn, and we're falling in with several other players where we've paid pretty substantial sums for us for Trusty, but are we just forgetting the fact that he's only just in the door? We signed these guys, and same with Engels. We signed these guys so close to the to the end of the transfer window. It takes time to bed into a new team, new teammates, new manager style, new country, new culture. You don't know whether they've been able to bring their family over or whether they're still, having to commute distance. So there's a lot of elements I think we have to consider. So I do think we sometimes fall into that trap of just not recognising that it takes time for players to bed in and settle in. But then again,
Matt O'Reilly's a prime example. Look at Matt O'Reilly wasn't giving you the numbers that he gave you in season 3 and season 1. He wasn't scoring 19 goals and 18 assists in season 1. Obviously you could tell that there was to coin the cliche, there was a player in there, and you knew that he was a good player, and we locked out in terms of the money that we paid for him and everything else. But I mean, he wasn't like sort of 8, 9, 10 out of 10 in every match. It was sometimes he was, I don't know, 6 out of 10. I don't think that's disrespectful to say that he maybe wasn't operating at the top level at that point. And then you look at his numbers in season 3 and the season that he gets a big money move down to England. If Engels has the same kind of career progression as Matt O'Reilly at Celtic, then you would expect, if he's here in season 3, if we're lucky enough to have him that long, that he will be putting in similar numbers, if not better.
Absolutely, yeah. That leads us nicely on to looking ahead then. So I think, what we are seeing is this, strong squad depth. But last night, high intensity game, a lot of tired legs. Would you mix it up for Motherwell? Would you, particularly in the centre of that park, where we seem to be probably the strongest replacements?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be disappointed if Bernardo started, for example. Didn't start last night. McCowan is playing his way into starting a Celtic game now quite easily. I think
what a night it must have been for him last night, right? Coming on and Champions League out.
I can't even imagine how good that must have felt, especially considering I heard from the guy that sits behind me that move nearly didn't happen. Like, he was told it was off, and then he was away back down the road, and then the next thing it was back on. So yeah, his emotions that night must have been all over the place. And then I mean, the guy's he's 26, right? So he's grown up as a wee guy, and all he's known is Celtic playing in the Champions League. He's not known what you and I probably remember from the 90s, where Europe was the first or second round of the UEFA Cup, and that was it.
Can barely remember Europe in the 90s. I really can't. I just remember Rangers going in and getting permanently hammered by Juve and various other teams. So I didn't mind watching Europe when it wasn't Celtic, because you got the other side. But yeah, you imagine.
I watched them in the Champions League, and as much as they were getting definitely annihilated most of the time, apart from their glorious run to the final that never was. I was always like, God, how amazing would it be to play in the Champions League, to see Celtic playing in the Champions League at the top level against all these big clubs, and then all of a sudden Martin O'Neill comes in and it just it starts to happen. Your games against Juventus at home, and you're seeing all these. Suddenly you're seeing players like Del Piero and things like that at Celtic Park, and you're like, whoa, he's actually there. And it's like, this is a competitive game. It's not like a organised friendly or a testimonial or anything like that. And so McCowan has grown up and will likely have been to Celtic Park for Champions League games as a fan. Yeah. And then now he's actually playing in the team as a fan, having come from Dundee. It's not a story that is familiar to. I mean, I think it used to happen a lot. And Paul said, obviously he knows his history better than me, but we would make signings regularly from other Scottish clubs who would invariably be Celtic fans and get the opportunity to play for Celtic. But it's not so common in the modern age, because the focus is always on, we'll go and get somebody from South Korea or in Quan, or we'll go and get somebody from Portugal and Bernardo from the system. We don't seem to look on our own doorstep, and yet there's a guy who clearly was a good player, always played well against us, and he's seamlessly come into that Celtic team. And for whatever he lacks in ability, he'll make up for in desire and
without a doubt.
If you're a Celtic player and if you're a Celtic fan and you're getting to play for that team, you're going to put in every single ounce of whatever you've got in you to help get that result. And because if you know that you can stand at the end and go over that away support and applaud them and be like, I've contributed to this moment, what a feeling. I mean, I don't think you wouldn't need paid at the end of the week after that.
No, he's probably still needing to be scraped off the ceiling at the moment. I mean, I just think what I love about McCowan, and where I think there's massive value in us, if we can scout more players like McCowan, for example. And I always love, go to some of the Acsom live events, and we've had Joe Miller, we've had Peter Grant, we've had Murdo McLeod, who I was privileged to speak to as well. And these are people who did come through the domestic league and played for the club, and you'd listen to them talk about their experience, you just think, God, as a young, one-time young Scots guy, that was the dream. I just picked up by Celtic and playing. But what I love about McCowan is he's coming in, he's 26, so he's right in the kind of prime years of his career, and hopefully he goes on to have a really long career. But he knows what the expectation level is at Celtic, because as a fan, what's going to resonate with you as a player on the park. And I think McCowan will go into that park probably thinking, I know how to get these fans on side. I know what they're going to look for, and I'm getting the chance to do it. I mean, every game's going to be like an audition for him. He's going to go out there and give it his absolute 100%. And I'd love to see him in the starting lineup. So yeah, I agree with you. I think Bernardo and McCowan, for me, I'd love to see them getting more minutes. I like the fact we've got options in midfield, but Bernardo is
finally
on a level. Finally, I know. You don't see the drop off. So I mean, I'm very much looking at Callum McGregor as well, and thinking, we're getting to the point in his career where, such an important player, can't criticise the guy at all, but we have to start managing him. He's still continually playing 90 minutes. He almost looks like he's got an allergic reaction to substitutions, because he just never seems to be pulled. And I think that's a reflection on what he brings to the team and his leadership, and obviously, how much value he brings. But you want that to last as long as possible. You want to have McGregor, for a good couple of years yet, and having to play that real influence. And what you hate to see is a player being worked into the ground where their influence starts to wane and it starts to drop and dip. When I look at a guy like McCowan, I think there's an opportunity potentially. There's someone that can come in and actually maybe not drop the levels of the attributes that McGregor brings, because McGregor's he knows exactly what the expectations of the fans are, and I think you're bringing in someone who, with the greatest respect to the guys who are coming in from overseas, but someone who's just all about the club and knows what the club is, and knows how to set the standard. So yeah, I'd love to see McCowan get some more minutes and really
remember
start.
We've got a midweek game next week as well, so that you've got to have one eye on that with regards to your team selection for Sunday. So I think there will be changes. And just thinking about the fact that he started Ida last night instead of Kyogo, and
it was an interesting one. What did you think? What did you think of Ida's performance last night?
I mean, obviously people are going to point to it and be like, "Oh, what did he do?" But I mean, I said to my mate as I was approaching the pub, I was like, well, "It's quite mad Ida's playing," but I'm kind of into it because Kyogo didn't touch the ball in Dortmund, pretty much. I don't think he really got a sniff.
Not necessarily through his own fault. I think it was just the way the game was
exactly.
played.
But I think there was far more likely that whatever we could get out of Ida was going to be probably better, and having Kyogo to bring off the bench was a really good option. And I saw some stuff online last night about Ida just going. I think John Hartson maybe said something about him. I think he questioned the signing or whatever at the time, and then you just see some fans just going, "I can't believe we paid $9.5 million for Ida and all this," and it's like, folk have got such a big problem with the fact that we paid such a big fee, and they just expect. I don't know. I wasn't expecting him to score last night. If he scored last night, I mean, that would have been incredible if he'd scored last night. And
he would have paid his $9 million fee with one goal last night, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm thinking back to what the guy's already done for us, and I think that buys him enough credit, surely, to be given a bit of slack. If he's not scoring goals all the time or whatever. Like, the guy's Irish, young, hungry, wants to play for Celtic. Came here. I mean, I don't know what his other options were, if there were any, but he's already done enough for me to allow him to be given some slack in terms of the goals that he scored. I mean, we're going to Fir Park on Sunday. Wait, who won us that game at Fir Park last season? Him.
Absolutely, it was.
And I'm sorry, but I don't know how you can just forget that. It's that was a massive result that night.
It was a massive part of why I think we're in the league last year, because when Kyogo, for as much as I love Kyogo, it's a lot of pressure on one player to keep his standards so high throughout the season. You need bring someone on, and there are games. Kyogo's the type of player where there are games and teams or opponents rather that they'll play a certain way that just doesn't necessarily suit his best traits, and Ida just gives you that different element. I think the biggest endorsement, though, and I think what people need to realise about Ida, and this is just my view, and I respect everyone else's view on it, but my view is that $9 million was worth Ida because the manager wanted him. He was one of the manager's top targets. And we all have the theories or the belief that one of the reasons Rodgers left or felt he couldn't continue in Celtic the first time was largely around our failure to get his targets. I think it was important that whether you think Ida is worth the $9 million or not, just leave the value out of it. The fact is the manager wanted him. The manager said, that's my number one target, or number whatever target it was, says that's a player I want in. And I think the fact that the club said, okay, fair enough, let's go and get it and pay what it takes. And ultimately he might go through the season and no score too many goals and people will be questioning the value. But I think the fact is that he's been brought in there to do a job for the manager. And last night I thought he did the job he was asked to do. I mean, as you say, expecting him to go and score against Atalanta or, against several European clubs might be a big stretch, because $9 million or not, this is Ida's first venture into Europe as well.
He's got a goal in the Champions League already at home, and folk will point to the opposition and be like, "Oh well, we paid $9 million. He should be scoring against muck like that." And you're like, "Wait a minute, give the guy a break." It's like you say, it's his first time playing in the Champions League. The only time he's played Champions League football before this is on FIFA. So there's got to be a period of adaptation and patience. It's just patience doesn't seem to be something that people have a lot of these days. Everything's instant. Everybody wants everything now. Like across the whole of basically society, it's all instant gratification. Paul's mentioned that before as well. By the way, you better bring up some of these starred comments, or he'll get.
I was going to say we're getting in there. I'm forgetting I'm only on for the second half of the show. I feel as though we've still got an hour to go here, but we don't. So I'll bring in a few others. So here's one from Kevin. Afternoon, Acsom. Talk about squad game. Well done. Every single player played their part there last night. Hail, hail. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's something we've been crying out for the past couple of seasons. Actually, I would say is that we want to rely more than just the first 11. Jungle Lion, welcome to the show as always. Bonus point last night. I think so. I think we would have bitten your hand off for that beforehand. But what we've got to do is we've got to now take that and say, okay, let's build on that. Let's take the positives for that performance and go forward. David Boyle, good to see you. Last night was exactly what we needed. Brilliant performance. I hope Engels gets a rest at the weekend. He looks exhausted. I think it's probably less physical exhaustion and probably more just the fact that he's like, what is going on here? I've came here. I'm Champions League. I'm Cup.
It's a roller coaster. He's not. I mean, Augsburg weren't playing like Saturday, Wednesday. And but at that intensity as well. Like I said, like. It must be the concentration levels that you have to have. You don't want to be the one that lets that side down, do you? You don't want to be the person that makes that mistake. So your concentration levels are going to have to be doubled up.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, right? I mean, you just it's the level of expectation. A lot of people talk about coming to this club, that's a Doddle, will walk the league is no problem. It isn't. Even when you're dominating domestically, the expectation levels and the pressure on these young guys must be immense. So yeah, absolutely, totally agree.
I mean, as my mate pointed out last night, that's why they get paid the big bucks. But ultimately, you still need to deliver, and you're quickly thrown into the scrap heap if you don't. So
well, unless your name's Scott Bain, of course. But yeah. Brown Warrior, good to see you. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't the Celtic way in inverted commas there, but it was effective and it did prove a point. Well done to Brendan Rodgers for both altering his own approach and making a sensible decision to do so. Yeah, I agree. I think it's right that the manager gets credit there. And look, we all want to see our team play the Hollywood football that we did, prior to the Dortmund game. But it's just, I know it's going to be a Klaxon word, but we have to be pragmatic about where we are in the European food chain at the moment. And I think, adapting our game to get the results, whether those are draws or whether those are hard-fought victories. Okay, ultimately it'll all be about the end result. But yeah, looking really good. And then Danny Sloan comes in. What a performance last night, showing we can mix it with the boys, and hopefully gives us the confidence to have a good go in the rest of the games. I think, yeah, I agree with that. I think, but not necessarily being cavalier about it. I think, I don't think we can go in suddenly again and think we can go and beat every team, but I think we could certainly take from that and say if we do our job well, we can absolutely compete, and we can, not only avoid getting beaten, we can go in there and possibly get wins and good wins, depending on the opposition. Let's check see a few others here that Sean's that Paul John has got. Oh well, okay. I may as well bring this up. Paddy, I've warned you about this, and this is the type of comment that is giving me itchy trigger finger, by the way. So just warning it. And then Patrick Kerrigan comes in and says, "Been out of the Acsom loop a few weeks after a family tragedy. Deepest sympathies, Patrick, and hope you and the family are doing okay. But thought I'd tune in today rather, and the channel's a nice comfort in difficult times. Well, do you know what, Patrick? I've been in similar circumstance with that, and that was my route to finding Acsom a few years back when I was, listening to Paul John and JP and Kev, etc., and everybody that's now part of the group. And there is a comfort in a community within Acsom, and I say that from personal experience. And I've came from being one of the guys in the comments to having this opportunity, which I'm really grateful for, and appreciate everyone that sends nice feedback, and even some of the more constructive feedback, shall we say? But
there's plenty of that. There's plenty of
that. Absolutely. But Patrick, absolutely everybody for Acsom, myself included, wishes you all the best. And dark times don't last, mate, but good people do. So JP, I won't speak to you probably until after the game now, but I guess always good to get a wee prediction. So, what's your prediction for the Motherwell game?
God Almighty! I don't think it will be. I don't think it'll be a high-scoring game, but it is always a tough place to go. I'd like to think we'd get the job done and maybe get a narrow victory by a goal or so. I just don't see us going there. I mean, look at what happened at Ross County. Everyone was probably expecting us to go there and wipe the floor with them, but it just doesn't work out. It doesn't work out like that. So yeah, I would hope for a 2-1 or something like that. But you've got to be wary of them. They've got this kid Lennon Miller that everyone's raving about. He's got another season under his belt now. People say that he's ready to step up to another level. I mean, that's only one player, admittedly, but if it's tight and he could make a difference, then you've got to be careful with somebody like that, because he's been spoke about. I don't see a lot of Motherwell. Why would I watch Motherwell, really? But I mean, I've heard so many people in the media talking about him and bigging him up, and I don't think there's any chance of him going to Rangers, put it that way. I mean, he's obviously, he'll have higher sights than that, I think, from a financial point of view and from a playing point of view as well. So unless, of course, he is a diehard Rangers fan or something like that in the Luke McCowan mould, but I just think if there's offers on the table for him, the way that he's been spoken about, the money won't be possible for them, I don't think. So
no.
Yeah,
I think again, you mentioned it earlier, one of the best judges of certainly a player that should maybe be on our radar domestically is if they put in a good performance against us. So yeah, maybe something to keep an eye on if it does.
I just think we're too stacked. We're too stacked now in that area.
We're too stacked, but it's always a good way of saying, well, is this one that we maybe pick up? But yeah, I agree with you. So 2-1 for you. You take a 2-1 just to get the 3 points and move on to the next.
Get out of Dodge, yeah.
Get Dodge, absolutely. Yeah, I'd take that.
But we'll see. I don't know what the.
I'll go. I'm always usually Mr. Optimistic. It never usually works out, but I'll try and stay as pragmatic, word of the day, as I can. I think we'll go for a 3-1. I think a 3-1. I think just there's always a wee bit of a mistake after Europe, but I think we've got enough about us to go.
I've got great memories of being at the 7-1 game at Park. Oh yeah. Larson scored 4. I often say that fourth goal he scored with a ball over the shoulder, where he just just let it hit off his left foot. I'm sure. It was absolutely amazing. Like, what a great night. I've still got the full game on tape.
Brilliant!
I don't think that's probably one of my favourite away games ever, because it was just dynamite. But unfortunately, that night, if people remember, Lubo got injured. It was in February.
I remember that actually. Yeah,
he got stretchered off and missed the rest of the season, and basically that was the end of our title challenge, I would say, when we lost Lubo.
That's right,
because he was massive for us. But yeah, good memories of Fir Park. Hopefully that continues on Sunday.
Brilliant. Well, listen, we are at time. We're 1,500 strong, so I'll do my best Paul John impression and say, listen, thank you to absolutely everybody that's contributed. Great to see so much positivity coming out of a European match, and long may that can continue this season and beyond. JP, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think it's been the first time I've been on with you, and I'm sorry I'm not as musically versed as Paul John, but I'm working on it.
But I mean, we don't need to go there usually. Did you go to the Guns N' Roses gig last year?
I did. I was there. Yeah, but that's where I got this T-shirt. I've never felt so old though going to a concert, because there's so much grey hair there. Oh yeah, honestly.
Oh right, I think it was like a young crowd. I was going to say surely not.
No, just walking up and just seeing. Damn, it's like, I look at the age of that guy. Is that what I look like now? It's that kind of thing. So
yeah,
makes you
reality bites at gigs like that.
Absolutely.
You're no spring chicken, but I've never seen them. I was away last year when they played, and I was kind of gutted because they don't.
It was tremendous.
They don't play that often.
They don't, and I'd never seen them live, so it was a bit of a thrill for me because that was my band growing up. I usually have an argument with my wife; she was a Nirvana fan, whereas I was a Guns N' Roses fan. So we have a few ones. Yeah, that's what I say. Why can't we both? But anyway, listen, everyone, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Thanks very much for tuning in, and Paul John should be back tomorrow, and we'll also be featuring another episode of This Is Acsom, and it's going to be a good one. So, looking forward to that. JP, thanks again, sir, and we'll catch you later on a Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers.